Happy Martin Luther King Jr. Day, and welcome back to another episode of Politics Unfiltered. Today's episode is brought to you by AV Stagecraft for all of your audio and video needs, including consulting and product rental for projectors, sound systems, and lighting for your events. Visit www.avstagecraft and let them help bring your project to life. They're actually a pretty awesome company. Make sure you check them out. Folks, today people all across America and all around the globe are gathering to honor the life and legacy of a great man, Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. But honoring Dr. King requires more than quoting him, more than posting photos or videos or quotes from him today, more than celebrating a holiday that this country, that America, fought tooth and nail not to create. Because let's be honest, America didn't want Martin Luther King Jr. And for a long time, it didn't want this very day. It did not want MLK Day as a national holiday. This episode is going to be about facing a hard truth while also realizing that our fight and the fight that Dr. King was fighting so many decades ago is still the fight we must fight today. Let's rewind and take a step back and go down memory lane for a moment. It took 15 years of resistance. It took millions of signatures. At the time, I think something like 6 million signatures on a public petition, the most ever on a public petition during that time to make this a national holiday. It took relentless pressure. It took public shame. It took people standing up and fighting day after day, month after month, year after year to make Martin Luther King Jr. Day a reality. And to the late Coretta Scott King, who was relentless in that effort, she was a leading force in helping to make sure that America and the world recognized the contributions that Dr. King had made to our country. Before this nation agreed to honor a man once labeled dangerous, they labeled him divisive, they labeled him un-American. It took his wife and so many other leaders standing up to make this a reality. So we celebrate today with a sense of gratitude bigger than what most people will ever imagine. So when you hear folks playing that Stevie Wonder's version of Happy Birthday, you turn it up and let that energy consume you, because it took a lot to get to this day. And even then, even after it became a nationally recognized holiday, there were states, predominantly in the South, predominantly those Confederate states that dragged their feet, that tried to rename the holiday, that paired it with Confederate Remembrance Days, that rejected it at the ballot box because they didn't want it. They didn't want their states to stand for or be a part of what Dr. King stood for, trying to make this nation recognize that it could only be great when it lived up to its constitutional rights, when it lived up to what it put on paper, as Dr. King said. And it wasn't because they misunderstood Dr. King. It was because they understood him perfectly. They knew exactly what he stood for. They knew what Dr. King meant to this country and to the world and to the order of what had become the norm in this country. They knew Dr. King didn't just dream. He disrupted, he challenged power, he exposed injustice that was comfortable, profitable, and protected. And today, folks, I'm here to tell you that those same forces that Dr. King was fighting against, that they never really disappeared. The truth is they got scared as hell. They ran into hiding. They got badges, they got political positions, they got corporate titles, and they sat by and they silently spent the last decades regrouping, plotting, and planning on how they could reinstitute the very thing that Dr. King was fighting to help break, the very thing that has shown that deep and divisive inequality in our nation. And they've been somewhat successful. They've traded fire hoses for legislation. They've replaced mobs with messaging. They've swapped whites-only signs for zoning laws, school funding gaps, voter suppression, economic exclusion, and even digital intimidation. The struggle didn't end in 1968 on the balcony of the Lorraine Motel here in my hometown of Memphis. It didn't end. That struggle didn't end then. It modernized. And here's what I mean. Here's what I mean when I say it modernized, because I want to put this in perspective for you. Dr. King fought segregation. Yep, folks will jump up and down, oh yeah, we don't have to use separate water fountains. We can go through the front door. We can eat anywhere we want. We can shop anywhere we want. Dr. King fought segregation. Folks, today, we live with modern segregation. Look around your communities. Black neighborhoods, white neighborhoods, self-segregated. Masked as choice. Predominantly white schools, predominantly black schools, it still exists. Masked as choice. Geography, economics, masked as suburban moms and golf club memberships. Segregation now is masked as gated communities and private schools. That's what I mean when I say we're still dealing with this struggle today. Dr. King fought suppression. That's another example. Dr. King fought voter suppression. Yippee, hip, hip, hooray, I can go out and I can vote. Yet, voter participation, voter turnout in so many states is at levels unbelievably low. Right here in my home state of Tennessee, one of the lowest in the country. And today, we think that fight, Dr. King's fight against voter suppression ended when we were given voter rights, given the right to vote. Today, ballots are being purged left to right. Right now, the Department of Justice is asking states to send them their voter rolls so they can purge voters. Districts are being drawn to silence voices, and access to the ballot today is treated like a privilege instead of a right. We have the Supreme Court right now weighing whether or not the Voting Rights Act is still even relevant when it comes to redistricting, when it comes to voter suppression. Dr. King fought poverty as violence. People get a $25 an hour job, get a salary, get some good benefits, and they say, "Oh, I'm out of poverty." Thank you, Dr. King, for fighting poverty as violence. Folks, today people work full-time jobs and still can't afford dignity. When Dr. King set out on that Poor People's Campaign, he wanted to try to restore dignity to working folks in this country. Today, that fight continues. Dr. King warned us. We've gotten comfortable. Folks have gotten silent. People, have gotten theirs and really don't care about if the next person get theirs. Don't worry about you. I got mine. That's the mindset of too many people. Dr. King warned us about this moderate mindset. This moderate mindset that pretty much says you prefer order over justice. As long as it's going okay in your eyesight, don't disrupt it. Don't bother it. Don't stir up the pot. And today that same spirit lives on in people who say they believe in Dr. King but refuse to stand like Dr. King. They love his words. I mean, they can quote you Dr. King quotes backwards and forwards, but they reject his methods. They celebrate his dream but condemn disruption. They praise courage in hindsight but punish it in real time. Let me say this plainly. If you're listening to this podcast, if you believe in what Dr. King stood for, but you stay silent when injustice shows up, you are not neutral. If you quote Dr. King, but criticize those who protest, organize, and apply pressure, you're a fraud. You're being disingenuous. If you honor Dr. King one day a year on MLK Day, but ignore discrimination the other 365 days you turn your head, you are not honoring him. You're sanitizing everything that he stood for, everything that he fought for, everything that he gave his life for. Dr. King didn't ask for comfort. He didn't. He didn't show up at the Edmunds Pettus Bridge saying, we want to be comfortable when we march. He didn't show up in Chicago fighting for fair housing, saying, I want to be comfortable when I march and protest for fair housing and equal housing and equality. He didn't say when we boycott the bus in Alabama, I want to be comfortable. He didn't say I'm going to Memphis to stand with sanitation workers because I want to be comfortable. He demanded courage. You had to be courageous. I am a man were the signs that they were wearing in Memphis. You had to have courage to do that. And today, courage is still required. It's necessary. It's what's going to make us get out of our seats and get on our feet. Because, folks, that same intimidation that Dr. King faced is back. It has returned with a vengeance. That same level of discrimination he faced has evolved. And dreams are being delayed, denied, and dismantled in this country in new ways. And people are waking up to an American nightmare instead of an American dream. I have a dream. But you got to go through hell to see that dream nowadays. We see it in who is discouraged from voting. We see it in who is underfunded in schools. We see it in who is locked out of opportunity. We see it in who is told to wait, be patient. Not now, not like this. You don't have to protest today, protest next year, protest next week. We see it. We see it in who is being shunned by those in power in this country. Folks, that is the same spirit that tried to stop Dr. King. It's the same spirit that tried to stand in the way of his fight for a better future for our country, even if he didn't get to see it. Even if we don't get to see it, it's that same spirit. Hell, that's the same spirit that tried to stop this very MLK Day from existing, from being a holiday. The same fear of justice, the same resistance to accountability, the same refusal to confront inequality and do it honestly. Like, it's one thing to stand up for something, but it's another thing to stand up for it with conviction and with a deep level of honesty, because you really do believe in it, because you truly do believe in it. You're not just standing up for it because everybody else is standing up for it. You're standing up for it because you can honestly say, I believe in this. I know this to be right. I know this to be true. That's what that means. Dr. King once said that a time comes when silence is betrayal. And I say, and I want to particularly say that because we see so much happening in this country right now, and we see those in power just sitting by silently waiting. That they're letting the worst of the worst happen, and they're just standing there, sitting there in power and in silence. Dr. King once said, folks, that a time comes when silence is betrayal. That time, I believe, is not behind us. That time is right now. That betrayal is happening right now. Right now, as you're listening to this podcast, someone is betraying you. There is a Democrat who is silent. There are definitely a whole party of Republicans who are silent. There are clergy folks who are silent. There are nonprofit leaders who are silent. People who are entrenched in power in our cities, Black, white, Asian, Hispanic, who are sitting by, silent. And they're saying, oh, I don't want to get my funding cut. Oh, I'm up for re-election. I can't get involved. Our church doesn't, get involved in politics. Our organization doesn't get involved in politics. And they use that to be able to sit back in silence, in the comfort of silence, as injustice and inequality continues to fester in the very communities that they're supposed to be helping to protect, helping to expand, helping to become better. Folks, that time for betrayal is happening right now. I want you to think about this. I want you to think about this because today on MLK Day, they're going to be out here and they are going to be in full force, trying to be as close as a resemblance to Dr. King as they can. I want you to think about the folks who haven't spoke up and who haven't spoken out. And then I want you to remember when they start quoting Dr. King on their social media pages or putting out these press releases for MLK Day, I want you to remember that MLK Day was never meant to be a day off, never meant to be a day of silence. It was meant to be a day on, a day of reflection, a day to recommit, a day to decide whether we are willing to do more than admire Dr. King and instead embody him. Because the question of our time is not whether Dr. King was right. Hell, we know that. History already answered that. We know that he was right. We know that he was on the right side of history. The question is whether we are brave enough to finish the work. Not with performative praise, not with selective memory, but with action. And this is where the struggle meets us today. Because right now, the American people are living in fear and pressure that feels all too familiar. You ask somebody who was alive in the 40s, 50s, 60s, early 70s, even hell the 80s. You ask them, what they think about today, and they'll tell you, it feels all too familiar. The discrimination feels too familiar. The intimidation feels too familiar. Weaponizing the government against the people feels too familiar. The militarization of our communities feels too familiar. This inching towards conflict abroad feels too familiar. They'll tell you that. Families are being torn apart by ICE raids that move through communities like occupying forces. Not like protectors, but by occupying forces. Workers are living paycheck to paycheck while prices climb and wages stall. It all feels too familiar. Poverty is still here. The Poor People's Campaign is still as relevant today as it was when Dr. King set out on it. The Poor People's Campaign is still as relevant today in probably the exact same areas of the country as it was then. Entire neighborhoods are being militarized. They're being surveilled. They're being policed and treated as threats instead of communities. Dr. King warned us about this kind of society, folks. He warned us about this kind of society. A society that spends more on control than they spend on care. Spends more on weapons than it spends on opportunity. More on punishment than it spends on justice. And make no mistake, if you're listening to this podcast, you make no mistake about this. Dr. King wasn't just out here warning us about it. He just wasn't saying that this stuff was possible. He lived under these dangers. He and his family lived under these dangers, under constant threat. He was followed. He was betrayed by folks inside of his inner circle. He was wiretapped. He was threatened daily, labeled as an enemy of the state by this country. The FBI was weaponized against Dr. King, not because he was violent, not because he was running for president, but because he was effective at bringing light to the struggles of the folks in this nation. Because he challenged racism. He challenged militarism. He challenged economic exploitation. And he was able to effectively do all these things at once. And because of that, this country, our FBI, was weaponized against him. And today we're watching history repeat itself. We see the Department of Justice and the FBI being used as political weapons, not in service of justice, but in service of retribution. Not to protect democracy, but to punish dissent. Not to defend the people, but to defend power. This is not a Republican problem. If you're listening to this podcast, if you are listening to this podcast, let me be crystal clear. Let me get a little bit closer to the mic. This is not a Republican problem. This is not a Democratic problem. Folks, this is an American problem because racism doesn't belong to one political party. Authoritarianism doesn't have one zip code. These fascists are everywhere. Oppression does not wear a single uniform. It shows up wherever it is convenient and in whoever is willing to help it fester. Wherever silence allows it, wherever people choose comfort over conscience. Too many people today that they're willing to say up and they're willing to sit up and say, this isn't who we are. This I don't recognize America. This isn't who we are. While at the same time, they'll sit there and they'll benefit from exactly who we've allowed ourselves to become. They won't say, I'm done benefiting from who we've allowed ourselves to become. They'll just say, this isn't who we are. Well, then put a halt to that benefit. Put a halt to it. Stand up. Put your money where your mouth is. Because Dr. King didn't have that luxury. He faced death for telling the truth. He faced prison for demanding justice. He faced surveillance for loving this country enough to challenge it. And yet, we couldn't even applaud him. This country couldn't applaud him as a great American trying to do the right thing. Hell, in 1964, the world recognized what America could not. Dr. King, let's talk about the Nobel Peace Prize for a minute. Because in 1964, Dr. King received the Nobel Peace Prize, not for wealth, not for power, not for dominance, but for moral courage. For moral courage. That's at the top of the list. For nonviolence, for sacrifice, for speaking truth when it was dangerous. And that is why history remembers Dr. King as a man of peace. That's why we celebrate the life of Dr. King and the service of Dr. King and the sacrifice of Dr. King on this MLK Day. But I also want to be real. That's why Donald Trump has not received the Nobel Peace Prize. Because as he's trying to recreate this golden age where so many people were locked out and left out, he's also wanting to be seen as a champion for peace. Let me say this. Peace is not intimidation. Peace is not vengeance. Peace is not branding yourself a savior while tearing institutions apart. Peace requires humility. Peace requires restraint. Donald Trump, if you're listening, if anybody in the administration is listening, peace requires justice. So on this MLK Day, let us be clear. Let us be clear no matter what part of the country we're in. Let us be clear regardless of if you're working or not at work, if you're marching or if you're standing still. Be crystal clear that Dr. King does not belong to the past. His struggle is alive and well and living right now. That struggle lives right now. And the real question is not who'll quote him the best, but who will risk something to live what he taught. Because the struggle that he was fighting against, it still continues today. And history is going to be watching. And it's going to be watching and recording who stood up and who stood by. This has been another episode of Politics Unfiltered. As always, especially today on this MLK Day, especially as we kick off 2026 and head towards an election, it has never been more important for you to use your voice, for you to use your power, for you to stay engaged, for you to stay involved, and for you to stand up for something. This is Politics Unfiltered, and I'm out.